Today, let's talk about semen retention. No, not the Navy's new plan to reduce turnover rates. Sorry. Rather, the practice of the serious young man to transmute his sexual energy to harness his sexuality for, some may say, a higher purpose, which is nothing new. Semen retention goes back to Hermeticism, at least. It's an aspect of alchemy. You take this base material and turn it into gold, psychological gold. What do you think alchemists meant by base material? Lead, yes, but also another substance, and alchemists were quite specific about it, or as specific, I guess, as a 16th century monk could be. So while this topic has been talked about a lot for thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of years, all the way down to this dank corner of the internet, everybody misses the point about it to such a degree, I would say, that it sets young men up for failure. If you want to quit porn and transmute your sexual energy, because that's what semen retention is about, now at least. So if you want to do this, if you want to quit porn, transmute your sexual energy, it will require you first and foremost create a healthy relationship with your sexuality, which may have really nothing to do with semen retention. Before we get to that, though, I'd like to take a few moments to talk about my new book, The Therapy Manifesto, which lays out the fundamental principles of therapy. And if that sounds pedantic, well, it is. But that's the beauty of principles. You can go really abstract. We talk about big picture ideas, and we also get really concrete. We go over what you can talk about in therapy, how to talk about it, and for what purpose, because spoiler, everybody, the purpose of therapy is the same for everybody. So go check that out. Link is in the description. To the outline. First, we'll discuss the general idea of semen retention. Then we'll discuss the point that semen retention misses, which will lead to a discussion of compulsion, and a proper understanding of compulsion will show how semen retention exacerbates the porn and masturbation problem. And when you exacerbate, you will masturbate. And we'll look at the relationship between sex and emotion, so we can identify sex transmutation for what it is. You need to know what sex is psychologically if you want to transmute it. So what semen retention is? The idea is, if we abstain from sexual acts, especially those that lead to orgasm, if we retain our semen, we can use that sexual energy in our non-sexual actions. We can transmute it to become more energized, more assertive, to increase magnetism, charisma, riz, aura. Sorry, it's just such a dumb word, right? Even the ability to influence your reality, some may claim. Maybe. But it does make sense. Right? You masturbate and get sleepy. There's that post-coital somnolence, or I guess post-self-coital somnolence. So you think that if you keep this life force inside you, then it's able to somehow permeate, infuse your cells, like NOS basically, for your psyche, for your status. And there may be some truth in this idea that semen retention gives you more energy, that it increases your testosterone. I don't know. I don't care. My criticism of semen retention isn't going to be, hey, check out this one study. Because, there's still going to be plenty to criticize in semen retention, even if it does give you more energy. And who wants to hinge their argument on a psychological study? You're going to have a bad time if you do that. So what's wrong with semen retention? Not that there's anything wrong with semen retention in itself, but it is a red herring. It is a distraction, because when it comes to your psyche, to the health of your psyche, to the cultivation of your libidinal energy, it's not so much what you do, it's why you do it. Hear me now, believe me later. It's the intention behind the action that matters. That intention is, in fact, your psychology. It's your emotional state. One guy goes to law school because he's interested in public defense. Another guy goes to law school because he wants to keep his dad off his back. Same action, two completely different psychological universes, two completely different levels of aura, right? So semen retention is fine if that's what you want to do, if you think it gives you some benefits somehow, but it's not the main thing. And so when you treat it as the main thing, then you end up thinking that your sexuality somehow comes down to your semen, to your seed, that it has some magical qualities, which will be the seed of your own destruction. All right. To see what I mean by this, let's look at what one mindset coach, Quasi, says about this topic. That's his name, Quasi, not to pick on him, but what he says here about semen retention and sex transmutation is representative of how a lot of people mishandle it. So anyways, what Quasi says is there are 5 levels of semen retention you must master to control your reality, as he says. And here they are in ascending order of reality mastery. First, there's masturbate with porn. That's the lowest level. Then there's masturbate without porn, sex with ejaculation, sex without ejaculation, and then the highest form of sexual reality mastery is celibacy. So, do you see the problem here? According to this, porn and celibacy are on opposite ends, even though they are the two that are most likely to be done with the same intention, with the same nefarious intention. They're the two that are most likely to be done compulsively. The celibate man may have more testosterone than the coomer. Thank you. Thank you for that study that probably has a p-value the size of New Jersey. Yet both actions, the porn and masturbation and the celibacy, both are compulsive. And compulsion wrecks your energy way more than whether a certain fluid ejects from the end of your urethra. Sorry, just trying to think of good ways to talk about this. I mean, seriously, what makes you more exhausted? Scrolling Instagram for 6 hours or a wet dream? I mean, come on, right? So what is compulsion? Compulsion is when you partake in an action to avoid pain. Emotional pain, I guess. It's usually a good idea to avoid physical pain. But it's when you partake in an action to avoid emotional pain. It's not to increase pleasure, it's to decrease pain. You drink a beer, not to participate in a ritual through which you connect with your friends and social circle. Rather, you drink a beer because you have work stress, and the alcohol in the beer removes the pain from that stress. You're looking for the click, as Bukowski says. And it's the same with semen retention. One guy practices semen retention because he wants to create a better relationship with his wife or girlfriend, and he realizes, I probably can't punish myself at 3 p.m. and then bring the same gusto to the bedroom at 9 p.m. Another guy practices semen retention to control reality because he thinks it gives him some magical power over a woman. If your goal is to control reality, you may just be entitled to some compensation. And it's the same with celibacy. One guy is celibate for a certain period of time because, maybe he's grieving his wife. Or one guy's looking for a wife and he realizes, it's probably not the best idea to cultivate interest in a woman who I am not completely interested in myself. So he may be celibate for a while. Another guy is celibate because he wants to protect himself from the emotional suck, from the inherent emotional suck that is woman. And come on, which guy is going to have more riz, right? It's not the decision you make. It's the intention. It's the emotional state behind the decision. Because really that emotional state is the decision, and emotion is the psychic analog of a decision. That's why we have emotions or feelings. But to look at the emotional state, you need to know. But to look at the emotional state behind the action, you need to know what emotions are and how they work. I'm not going to get into compulsion now, but compulsion is driven by anxiety, by unconscious anxiety. Not going to go into it here, but go check out my book. Link in the description for more information on that. Let's see. So that's one way. That's one definite way that semen retention makes your relationship with your sexuality and so your relationship with porn worse. It's avoidance. And sure, celibacy may be less pathetic than porn and masturbation. It's arguable, but it's still avoidance. The other way that semen retention makes the compulsion around sex and porn worse is it implies that sex is wrong. And it's not even that subtle of an implication when you say that celibacy is the highest form of reality sexual mastery. In this worldview, an orgasm it must necessarily detract from your higher self. Of course, if you ask Quasi whether sex is wrong, he would say it isn't. He would say it's about balance in this dichotomous worldview. You hear the word balance a lot. Big red flag whenever you hear that word. Or he may say something like, sex is a necessary evil. It's essential for reproduction. And he may cite you some story or some study, on prostate health. But these aren't really answers, right? These are excuses. They excuse sex. They don't really answer for how sex can be good, how it can improve your life, how it can give you more energy, how it can even, I would say, be necessary for the transmutation of your sexual energy, ejaculation and all. So this ties back to compulsion, because when sex is seen as lower, of course, maybe not of course, but it is way more likely to be expressed compulsively. Sex is seen as a temptation against which you test your moral fortitude. I mean, that sounds like compulsion to me. And there's limited connection. It feeds the problem. Sex isn't wrong. Of course, it isn't right. It simply is, depends on the context in which you use it, and to use sex properly, you need to understand emotions. Because that's the conceptual black hole, which is the reason for all this voodoo and compulsion around sex and masturbation and porn, because you don't know what emotions are. So you cannot see that psychologically sex is an emotion. An emotion is a particular neurophysiological state. You have many neurophysiological states. Most of them you don't feel. An emotion is one you do feel. It stems mainly from the interaction between your cortex, your amygdala, your hippocampus, but it can and often does involve every region of the brain, though usually not all at once. And we sense this as a feeling. We feel it. We feel it so we can do something. It's a mode of operation, a mode through which we function and get things done. What an emotion says is, you need to make a decision here. Something you care about is at stake. So, yeah, you need to do something. Look, there's something over there. There's something over there that you want. Go after it. Oh, look, there's a threat over there. Or, what appears to be a threat, so avoid it. And sexual desire is a feeling that tells you to connect in the context of your reproductive organs. How should you say that, right? So you could ask a girl out. That's one way. You can host a party, maybe to get noticed by one particular girl. Yes, you can have sex. That's one outlet for that sexual desire, that sexual feeling. But another outlet could be, even to talk with somebody about something that's sexually related, talking with somebody who you have no intention of having any kind of sexual relationship with. That could be a healthy outlet too. It drives you toward connection via sex, to get that need to connect over sex met. It's similar to anger, and usually your relationship with anger tells me pretty much everything I need to know about your relationship with your sexuality. Sex and anger drives us toward connection, as sex is the same thing, and it's a particularly important kind of connection. I mean, it's powerful. It's archetypal, like a spiritual connection, which is why Jung calls it the spiritual instinct, sexual instinct, spiritual instinct, whatever. The point is that when you can view sex in this way, then you can see that its transmutation isn't so much about semen retention. It's about using that feeling in a healthy way. So let's go to the emotional diagram to see how this works. All right, so here we are at the emotional diagram for anger, which is similar to sex. Anger drives you toward getting a need met. That's what triggers anger. There's a need out there. I want to get met. There's a need to connect sexually. I need to get met. That's also, I would say, injustice. Oh, look at all those douchebags out there getting laid and not me. So this need comes in. It causes anger. Sexual desire is, say again, an aspect of that. So I'll put sex here. Sexual frustration, right? It's like you have this need and you're not really getting it met. So you get frustrated. A lot of overlap here. So there's three things that you can do with anger. The first thing you can do is you can avoid it, which becomes sadness. I probably don't have to cite you some study that links minimal sexual activity with depression. And of course, when you avoid this essential part of your nature for long enough, you get a lot of hurtful ways, hurtful outlets for your sexuality. A lot of perversions happen here when you avoid it too much. Not going to get into that here. You need to become aware of your sex and anger. And the other thing here, of course, is that anger is often vilified in society. People often say that, anger is wrong, and sex, right? And sex, of course, gets vilified for the same reason. I mean, not that I think that, I'm painting the picture here that I'm like some hippie loving guy. I think it's good to have taboos around sex, and those taboos even make sex fun. I mean, there's taboos around farts, and fart jokes wouldn't be as funny if there wasn't a taboo around it, right? So it's okay to have taboos. It doesn't mean that sex is wrong or bad in any way, but that's a lot of the, that's a lot of the messaging we get, especially, about anger too. So we avoid it, right? We avoid that feeling, this feeling that's part of me is bad. So part of becoming aware of your sexual desires, realizing that, it's just this part of me, and all depends on how I use it. Avoiding it's one way to use it, so to speak. Another way you can use your sexual energy is you can be hostile with it. You can hurt others. This hurts yourself. This hurts others. I mean, the main way that people do this, of course, is by manipulating others to get sex, being dishonest, putting up a smokescreen, pretending to be one way as opposed to another way to get sex, to extract the sex from somebody else. Usually to get a payoff, there's a secondary emotional payoff with destructive behavior, and the payoff here is usually validation. Another way that we use sex in a hostile way, it's more destructive for yourself. I mean, I used that phrase earlier. You punish yourself, and it's kind of a punishment. Porn and masturbation is down here, which it's very difficult to imagine a scenario in when porn and masturbation wouldn't be destructive to you. So that's something you can do. Right? You can dump your sexual energy. You hurt others, or you punish yourself very much so. You need to take responsibility for that payoff, for either the validation you feel from extracting sex from others by putting up a smoke screen, or, the payoff for porn and masturbation usually is shame. Taking responsibility for that feeling brings you back up here at this general emotion of sex, an aspect of which, general emotion of anger, an aspect of which is that sexual desire, and only then can you use it in a healthy way to get that connection over sex met. And what do you feel then is, of course, compassion. And what teenage boy or young man, after he loses his virginity doesn't feel that compassion? I mean, he really understands what the word sonder means at that point, that oneness with humanity. You don't have to, of course, have sex. That's one outlet for this feeling. There's other outlets. Like I said, a 13-year-old who's starting to feel his first inklings of sexual desire. What would be healthy sex transmutation, sublimation be for him would be maybe to talk with somebody, ask questions. What is this? What's going on here? That would be very healthy probably for a 13-year-old to do. So that's sex transmutation. It's not so much about keeping semen in your body, although that may be something that inevitably happens because of that, but simply because you keep semen in your body has very little to do with sex transmutation. It's about using that feeling in a way that connects with other people. Respect for your boundary, what you feel, a lot of honesty here. This is going to involve a lot of brutal honesty, while also respect for other people's boundaries. So we can see that sex transmutation is really about using sex, using that sexual feeling to connect with others in a healthy way. And your sexual feeling is very powerful, right? You can use it. You can use that feeling to make decisions you never would have made otherwise. And you can also use it to carry out those decisions in a way that you never would have done otherwise as well. Also, because it's very powerful, when it's not reined in properly, it can be a huge distraction. I mean, think like there's a dragon chained up in the backyard and you can't ignore it. I mean, you can move to a monastery, but then other people have to deal with it while you get high on your own sense of self-satisfaction, in isolation. You can't drain its blood. If it gets sick, then you get sick. So what it feels like when you transmute your sexual energy, same thing when you transmute your anger, is it feels like focus, deep focus that is as much a part of you as your sexuality is. Similar with anger, right? Well-regulated anger is focus. Just think, the guy who invented the dishwasher, at least for a couple months, he couldn't be distracted. He came home from work every day to go out to the garage to tinker. And it's a lot easier to do that when you have a healthy relationship with your sexuality. You know what this looks like usually is there's one woman in your life, a woman who you can connect with emotionally. Of course, in order to do that, you need to know how emotions work. I'm not going to get into that now, but you can connect with her emotionally. You develop this thing called love for her. Maybe you have a crush on her a little bit. Someone who you want to maybe even impress with your dishwasher. So even when you go to the hardware store, to pick up parts, your head's not on a swivel. Your head is steady, looking ahead. What do prey animals do when somebody walks in the door, right? They're looking around like, who's that? You're focused, looking straight ahead, where you want to go, like a lion. So what's the takeaway? Well, the first takeaway I would say is just simply the physical act of it, just the simple one. The physical act of keeping semen in your body is a red herring, has nothing really to do with your sex transmutation. And to have this sex transmutation, you need a healthy relationship with sex. And to do that, you need to understand how emotions work to cultivate that healthy relationship. Huge red flag whenever there are levels to anything that has to do with your psychology. That's Scientology at that point. Related, it's also a red flag whenever you hear the word balance. The word, of course, is integration. There is no higher self and lower self. They are the same self. They only look different to you from your perspective. Shift over to where I am, where there's this coherent view of the psyche, and it's quite clear they are the same thing. You just have a better relationship with one than the other. We don't need levels. We need clarification, right? Rather than these 5 levels of quasi, we need to replace them with a gradient. Unhealthy, emotional expression on one hand, sexual expression on one hand, healthy sexual expression on the other, and both sides will pretty much have the entire gamut of actions. Big picture. What's the philosophical takeaway? I think here it's the importance of ontology. Semen retention is real. It's psychologically real, and the psychological benefits are real too. But problems happen when you begin to think that the symbol, the semen, is literal. The symbol of your sexuality is literal. You know that argument that says religion isn't literally true, or it may not be literally true, but it's as true as if it was literally true, which is correct. And that's coming from an atheist here, right? Religion is as true as if it was literally true. But that still doesn't mean it's literally true. And when you place your value in another realm, whether it's God or Jesus in heaven or semen retention in this Platonic world of idealism, there can be no process to achieve these values other than renunciation. That is, try harder. But there is a process. If you watch porn too much, or maybe you watch porn at all and don't want to, and you can decide to stop, then great, stop. Go to a climbing gym rather than watch porn. But if you're unable to do that, or when you try something like that, it doesn't last for long, then you have a psychological issue by definition. And I'm here to tell you, you need to submit to a process in order to get to that place from which you can begin to make the decisions you want to make. Begin to make decisions you want to make about your sexuality and not have them made for you. joinanimus.com/schedule. If you want to reach out, let me know what's going on and let me know what you think. Put it in the comments. Do you agree? Disagree? Describe the level of boredom you feel at this moment and go get that book. Link in the description. If you want to learn more about this topic, I did a video on it a bit ago on the 2 reasons why you can't stop watching porn. So go there. I'll put it here somewhere, probably. Same topic, a little bit different approach. So thank you. Thank you for sticking around to the end. And I wish you all the joy and pain that comes from developing a healthy relationship with your sexuality.